Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to do a little bit of race commentary for my Alt F4 weekly league race. You can join us if you're interested in some clean F4 racing on a weekly basis. We race Thursday nights. SundayNightSkippy.com is where you can find our Discord link.
Don't forget everyone, this is a 10-minute
Obviously,
race,
I said
so
Sunday
you
Night
don't need a
Skippy.
full
We
tank
do
of
also
fuel.
race Skippy on
So
Sunday
keep that in
nights,
mind,
which
but
makes
yep,
perfect sense, of
45
course.
minutes
Thursday
to
nights
30.
we have an F4
Good luck and
league.
have fun.
So
And thank you
if
for
you're
coming.
interested in either one of those cars, I would highly recommend joining the Discord. There's a whole bunch of like-minded people there that are friendly and competitive and, you know, happy to share information and help other people get better and just frankly have a good time. If you've watched any of these league races thus far, kind of have a general sense of how they go. They're pretty clean, a lot of fun. So let's get this one going. Have some fun. So context going into this race, if you watched my previous video about Monza, Monza's been a rough one for me this week. I actually have not raced a pub since I made the video the other night. So just jumping into the league race and trying to have some fun, keep it clean. So get a decent start. Really just again, you know, the first couple laps, just settling in, trying to find single file, try to be clean. I love this VR perspective. I hope you guys enjoy this too. I think it just gives so much more context as to what's actually happening in the middle of a race. Definitely missed some of the fidelity of my triples, but there's just nothing like being in the actual car during a race. So because we have some nice clean drivers, we're already in single file, you know, for most of the pack. At this point, just trying to get the tires warmed up and settle into the race. Did have a great qualifying effort. We started 11th in this race. I'm not really great at qualifying. I know last week was definitely the anomaly where I qualified 3rd for the heat race, and then of course promptly destroyed it a couple laps in. But this week we're starting 11th, which is probably more representative of where I live. And again, mindset going into this race, just like we talked about last week, top 10s are beautiful things. So we're in a good spot. Have an opportunity to make some forward progress here and see how we get on. But you know, I think what I just did going into these corners here is what we refer to at SNS as league mentality. You know, I had a little bit of a run. I probably could have made a move in either side, but you know, 10-minute heat race followed by a 40-minute feature race. We got a lot of racing to do tonight. Not really looking to push it on cold tires, make a mistake, you know, knock my buddy Chris out of this race. That's not what we're here to do. So backed off and you know, stayed behind my guy, warmed these tires up, and then we're gonna make a move into turn 1. It's amazing. I wish the guys that did the pubs, I hope you're watching this video. This is what you can do. You don't have to go for that move. Just be patient. Be patient, especially at a place like this. Another nice aspect to league racing, especially our league, I didn't anticipate it very well, obviously, with my corrections there. But as Chris and I went into turn 1, I clearly had the line. He backed off and let me go through. I left a lot of space. Turn 1 for sure, but even into turn 2, I probably should have known that he was going to let out, and I could have just easily taken the racing line to that corner. But I still gave him some space. I got a little squirrely coming out, corrected it, and off we go. So we're sitting up, joined 9th position. See our buddy JR off in the trees over there doing something. Thankfully, again, league mentality. Look at everybody in that situation that was off to the right, gave him tons of room to come back on the track. He was able to do so safely and rejoin everybody else. And spoilers, my buddy JR had a hell of a race, both in the heat and the feature. It's kind of another situation, again, with Jason. I could have easily sent that in there a little bit more. I had a decent run going into the corner. Backed off, lived to fight another day. Really, you know, in this league we really try to have proper overlap before we go for any moves. We very specifically call out we don't do dive bombs. So even if it's a gray area, just back out, live to fight the next corner, and let your buddy live to fight the next corner as well. This week at Monza has definitely been really interesting for me. I think, you know, I've had some interesting races, some not so great situations, maybe some miscommunications, if you will, and some leading frustration. But really glad that we got to Thursday and we're able to get into our league race here. That corner right there into turn one, JR and I were actually talking about that after the race. We weren't really sure what happened. I think I actually braked a little early, and you could kind of tell just based on the gap now that Jason has in front of me. I think I braked a little too early, and that put JR in a tough position. I think he had to kind of take evasive action to the right as to not make contact. Thankfully that worked out for everybody. I didn't screw him up. We were able to kind of get on through it. But the draft nature of this track, I think there are a lot of instances in this race, both the heat and the feature, where I did not do a good job of compensating for that extra speed. You know, getting into some of these corners, and if I'm not trying to go for an overtake, but still following pretty closely to a car, I didn't do a great job in a couple instances of taking that into account, braking a little bit earlier, getting off a little bit earlier to kind of compensate for that speed difference. Jim's definitely super aggressive. I don't think he doesn't really understand the context. Obviously, we're about almost 4 minutes into a 10-minute heat race that sets the field for the feature. So, honestly, at this point, I'm just trying to get some laps at Monza again. It's funny to say that I haven't done a race since, you know, I think it was maybe Tuesday this week. It's currently Thursday, and so for me, it was just kind of getting my feet back under me and getting comfortable back at Monza. I've done more F3 the last couple days than F4, so for me it was mostly use the heat race, get comfortable again, find my marks, and just be comfortable and confident. I think a lot of the stuff I went through earlier in the week really kind of destroyed my confidence at this place and in this car, so a lot of this race was really just trying to find that confidence again. So we're kind of finding ourselves in a little pocket here. JR and I are sitting 7th and 8th. Top 6 are really the top couple have checked out. Let's see here. It was Chaz that found himself off into the kitty litter. But yeah, at this point, you know, unfortunately the gap on race laps does not work for me for some reason, but Leo and Jeffrey have very much checked out. Chaz had himself a moment. Darren, John, and Jason, those guys are about a second and a half up the road from JR and myself, and we're sitting tight, and then there's a pretty decent gap to Chris, Connor, and others. So just trying to get through this race, have a decent finish, put ourselves in a good position to start the feature. Feature really does turn into, it feels like an endurance race, and I think part of that is the fact that still getting used to VR and being in that world for a 40-minute race is pretty aggressive. This 10-minute sprint race truly feels like a sprint race. Feels like it's over in a heartbeat. So I know JR is sizing me up. JR's a pretty conservative guy on the racetrack, but he's sizing me up. I know he's ready to make a move, so I can see him coming here on the inside, going into turn 1. I'm going to brake pretty early and just kind of give him that spot. I think one of the worst things you could do here is go too wide into turn 1. You lose so much time, it's unbelievable. And I think you see that. The guys in front, they're going to dice it up a little bit. That's going to put me and JR and I think back in this fight pretty quickly with those guys. My mentality through a lot of this is really not trying to fight too hard, which I know is a little ironic considering I'm going here into the chicane, trying to take that position, but realize I wasn't going to have it, so I backed out. It's going to give me a nice run here. See if we can get anything going into the Lesmos. Didn't really feel like pushing it, I guess. Guess I pushed it hard enough to hit that 1X. So trying to take my own advice and not do too much fighting. It's better a lot of times just to tuck in and try to maintain the draft and catch the group in front of you. So as we get to about a little less than 3 minutes left in the heat race, my mind's already kind of shifted towards thinking about the feature. The feature race is going to be 40 minutes. There will be a forced pit stop. So, you know, love the idea that we're sitting in the top 10.
Real bad.
Yeah, unfortunately got some internet issues going on in the race for somebody. But, yeah, anytime you can start in the top 10 of the feature race with this group, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. So I'm happy, very happy where I'm sitting right now. Looks like P7 is kind of worst case scenario at this point, so we caught ourselves up to the guys in front. That's, as I said, they kind of were dicing it up a touch, and they gave me and JR the opportunity to get in. And I'm pretty sure we're on the final lap here, even though the counter doesn't seem to suggest that we are. I'm pretty sure we're on the final lap. Thankfully my overlay that's sitting in VR gives us a little bit better information than what we're looking at from Race Labs, but until I can figure that out, we're just going to have to roll with it. So again, truly, last lap of the heat race. I don't even know if we get points for this race, to be honest. My mentality is, I love where I'm at. The last thing I want to do, make a mistake, put myself in a position to be starting 23rd, 25th, something like that for the feature, which is effectively where we found ourselves last week at Long Beach once I made a massive mistake at running P3 in the moment, which unfortunate, but happens. So looks like JR is going to try to put something here. Oh, no, JR backs off. These two being side by side does not work out for Darren. Darren goes around, and it looks like JR and John are going to have an opportunity to kind of drag race. Going into this corner, I remember, going into Parabolica, I definitely could have made this 3 wide, but again, league mentality, it's not what we're here for. I'd be thrilled to start P6 in the feature race. Thankfully, I was able to get a pretty sweet run coming out of Parabolica as we go across the finish line to finish the heat race. I actually do finish P7, and it was literally by 1/1000th of a second to JR, which was wild. Also timed that, or set up that fuel tank just right. Perfect. Alright, let's hop into the feature. Starting P6, 40 minutes, off we go. So John mentioned in Discord after the race he had wheel spin on both starts, so thankfully I was able to notice that immediately, get to the side, not have any contact. Kind of worked out for us. Made it a nice easy 1-2 first 2 corners there. So at this point, loving where I'm sitting. Currently sitting P5. Would love to be able to stick to JR's gearbox. And the first thought I had was I looked up and I was like, okay, I almost have a second gap. If I could find a way to open that up to a second and break that toe, that would be absolutely phenomenal. Unfortunately for me, that does not happen. And unfortunately for my buddy JR, he landed in the sand a little bit. Gave me P4 in the process. It's kind of hard to remember. So when we go through the heat race to the feature race, there's about a 2-minute warm-up session, which nobody's on the track. Everybody's like, you know, hopping up, hitting the restroom, taking a second, popping off the VR headset, whatever. And then you've got about 50 seconds to grid, and then the race goes. So you don't have a whole lot of time to kind of reset your brain. But, and really, you know, from a mental point of view, you've just come out of a race where the tires are completely warm. You've run 10 minutes, you know, in anger, and you're rolling. So that as soon as you come into the feature race, it's really easy to forget, like, oh hey, these tires are cold. I need to like chill out for the first lap or so and get these things up to temp. So I think JR made that mistake in those first couple corners there, but he's all back, ready to rock and roll. And unfortunately for us, the top 3 are kind of checking themselves out. Not surprised. Those dudes are quite literally from another planet. I noticed in my rear view these two both had quite the run. Figured I'd take it to the outside. See what I could do. JR's got the inside, kind of back off a little bit and let him have it. All good. Don't really get much of a run coming out of turn 2. Typically when I do something like that, thought process is that I'm going to kind of give them turn 1 and hope that they'll go just a touch deep and have a pretty poor setup for turn 2, and then I'll have a better turn 1 and an opportunity to kind of build some momentum coming out of turn 2 to make a move going into turn 3, but unfortunately that didn't happen. Definitely did have a slightly better corner there, but not a lot of space before you get to the first Lesmo to make a move, and it's really not a great place to make a move unless you don't like the person you're trying to make a move on. And in this case I do, so I'm just going to kind of settle in and let it rock and roll. See, John's got a pretty good run. Looks like he really wants to get back to where he was. He's going to go for it on the inside, and you can hear the revs. I just kind of back out of it, give him the spot, tuck in, see if we can just follow him on down towards Parabolica. Not 100% sure why I did this in hindsight. I made some momentum here. I definitely had to throw the car down in there. Finishing lap 2. Tires are pretty much up to temperature at this point. Truly, I mean, it was fine, I guess. Made the overtake. Really just need to make sure we keep in touch with JR. I think the worst thing that we could be doing right now is fighting too much. You'll see that's a theme throughout the rest of this race. You know, people kind of fighting maybe is the wrong word, but just cars being, you know, close to each other and swapping positions back and forth. If you do it in the wrong spot, you can lose an unbelievable amount of time. And that happens a lot in this race. Just truly just picking the wrong corner to pass on. It's fun, you know, but if you're trying to think big picture and catch the guys in front of you, you really want to be thoughtful about, you know, where you pass. And if you both have to compromise, you know, your speed, your corners to make those passes work or make those battles work, you're really not helping yourself long term. It's kind of mentally here. I've gone back. You know, I've gone from like 4th to where are we? 7th at this point. Lost a couple spots, all within about a lap. Kind of looking at the deltas and saying like, okay, Chris is pretty much in the mix here still. Well, Chris, George, and Dallas, let me specify, there's 3 of us. All kind of nuts to butts here. But he's definitely in the mix as well. Kind of thinking big picture, if he's here, he's really close, I lose one more spot. That's kind of like worst case scenario right now. Say for an incident or something crazy like that, sitting in 8th place. Totally fine. We're very early into a very long race. So kind of doesn't work out that way, but that's what my mentality is. Chris kind of falls off a little bit. I don't think he keeps up with this pack for a while. And really what happens is these 4 cars separate into 2 packs. So JR and John will kind of do their own thing. Chris and myself will basically do the same. Unfortunately, Chris and I, we trade positions a little too often, I think. Like I said, super fun, makes for a good time. Passing into turn 1's good. Passing in some of the other corners, you know, losing so much speed is not so great. And kind of in hindsight, I probably should have passed him into turn 1. That's probably one of the places where you can pass pretty reliably and not, you know, not really compromise both cars and their speed. But you really have to be thoughtful about where you do that. You'll see us do that in a few corners, and it just, you watch the delta and the relative, and John and JR just, they walk away from us because we do some of that throughout this race. There's definitely a mentality that you need to have with these 40-minute races. It's, you know, when you think about a pub race in F4 versus, say, this race in Alt F4, our private league, that is open to new members, and if you're interested in joining and jumping into this action, SundayNightSkippy.com, check it out. But there's definitely a mentality that kind of happens where you're racing hard and you're pushing and you're trying to, you know, run great lap times, but at the same time, it's a 40-minute race and there's a long ways to go. It's almost a war of attrition sometimes, even at a track like this. Certainly that's the case at a place like Long Beach, like last week, but even at a place like Monza, there's mistakes being made, people getting knocked out of the race. You're thinking about fuel strategy, or just trying to be smart, not do anything stupid. At least that's what I'm trying not to do anything stupid. And so you're not fighting tooth and nail for every corner, and because you only have 20 minutes to go. I mean, you've got 40 minutes to get this done. So I think that was one situation where it would have been wise for one of us to back out. You can see the delta for JR and John just growing. It's almost 2 seconds at this point, where it was probably half that less than a couple corners ago, and it does not behoove us in terms of catching these two guys to be side by side, especially at a corner like this. It's just dangerous. It's too easy for one of us to make a mistake, wipe each other out. But you know, you balance that, right? At the end of the day, it's also not fun just to sit back and give everybody the spot. You know, you want to fight. You're racing. That's part of the deal. But yeah, it's just a different mentality. I guess you have to kind of like figure out what works for you and what you're going for in this race. My mentality is definitely a little bit more on the long side. I'm cool to give a spot up, especially if I know, like, hey, I can tuck in and we can work together and, you know, make progress towards the front, and then we can fight towards the end and go nuts and have a great time. But I'm going to be more conservative to start the race and just kind of make some progress going forward. Not a great parabolica. Carried a touch too much speed there. I'm going to bleed that all the way down, it looks like. Oh, yeah, just a bit. It's tough too, and you start looking at that delta and caring too much about it. Got to remember, especially at a place like Monza, some of your best laps are going to be very much in draft. And clearly we are not there. Chris definitely is going to have a good run. He backs out into turn 1, which is good. I had a really nice turn 1, turn 2 there. Almost 4/10 up so far. That's pretty good. So yeah, Jeffrey and Leo very much checking out. Jason, off from them a touch, but definitely rolling along as well. As you kind of start to look towards the long tail of this race, it's looking like 4th is probably optimal, best case scenario. Not letting ourselves think about that too far in advance, but looks like this group here, we're fighting for 4th. So one thing that happened there in the chicane that I still don't understand what happened, John went off the track. Definitely would have had some kind of slowdown or something, but he just didn't seem to miss a beat. Still don't really know what happened there. But yeah, like I saw him going off the track thinking like, oh, okay, well, at a minimum, he's gonna have a slowdown. We're gonna be a pack of 3 here in a second. But that never seemed to happen. I'm not really sure why. He definitely got lucky on that one, I would have to say. Alright, Chris definitely had a run. He thought about it there. He started to go out to the right. I think he's starting to think a little bit more like me and tuck in, and let's see if we can make any progress.
Thank you.
And you know, hey, if we don't, let's fight it out. But this early in, let's see if we can make some progress and catch these guys up. I'm kind of looking forward myself, trying to think about what are they doing. They're side by side. They're dicing it up a little bit. I mean, they've got us by 2 seconds. That is one corner. That is one corner where 2 guys go in at the wrong spot and fight side by side. 2 seconds evaporates instantly. So you feel like you're 2 seconds behind for 3, 4, 5 laps in a row, and then all of a sudden one thing happens and boom, you're right there, you're mixing in, just like we did, JR and I, at the end of the heat race. That That group of 3 was a couple seconds up on us, and then we caught them at like just the right time. So I think this was an instance where we would have been better not to race through that corner like that. You can see we went from being 2 seconds back to now 3 seconds back. It's that easy. It really is that easy. And we're almost 3.5 seconds back. You know, it would have been wise, I think, for me or Chris to get on voice chat and just say something like, "Hey, you lead," or "Let's switch it up at this corner every lap," or something like that. There are definitely some tracks where it's wise to literally just tuck in and follow the guy like all the way through. I don't think Monza is actually one of those tracks. I think that's true for a lot of it, but there are definitely places, and maybe Parabolic is one, maybe Turn 1 is another, where you have so much momentum that you actually are slower if you just are letting off and tucking in. So you can see here, he had a good run on me. I backed off a little bit early into Parabolica, took a slightly wider line so I could carry speed and not lose as much, and then get right back on his gearbox and try to use that draft to my advantage. You can see it in the delta bar immediately. Like we are faster. So this is where we should, in theory, trade positions, and yep, perfect. So again, we're up on our delta. That's good. That's where we're making progress. You can see the guys now, they're 2.6 and 3 seconds ahead of us. We made progress by doing that. That's smart. And we should probably have done a better job of communicating and putting ourselves in a situation to work together that way. It worked itself out, I think. Like, we just kind of naturally did that, and we also kind of naturally had some pretty cool battles along the way too, but we definitely could have teamed up a little bit more. Hate to be the spoiler, but you'll come to find as this race goes on, it doesn't really matter what the two of us have done to this point. We do not end up in the same positions, fortunately and unfortunately. So Jim's telling me we got 10 minutes of fuel to go. Wish I could see that JRT right now to give you guys kind of some insight as to where we're going in terms of our pit strategy, but just to kind of talk about that a little bit, I don't have a pit strategy. I let JRT do my fueling. There we go. So we have just under 5 laps left in the tank. Couldn't see it again. Maybe I'll pop my head back up there. But yeah, we've got about 5 laps in the tank. It's going to add about 3 gallons. Got 14 laps left in the race. So I kind of start thinking about that a little bit, like, okay, you know, when do we want to pit? My mentality, I don't know if this is, you know, I don't know if this is the right way to do this or not. It's just kind of how I've always done it. It tends to work out. I'll let JRT do the fueling automatically, and I typically wait until I have to pit, and then I pit. Sometimes that works out really well, sometimes it's fine, and it's very rarely caused me any problems. What I didn't really think about in this race was that it would be useful potentially to have someone to draft with, both on your in lap and your out lap. That really didn't cross my mind as I was thinking about pitting here. You can see too, I'm making some silly mistakes. We're down 7/10 almost on this lap alone, just from some really poor corners. Not doing myself any favor, or Chris for that matter. Jim, as usual, always on it. Given the greatest of advice. Let's see if we can follow any of it. So you'll start seeing some guys go in. Yeah, this was terrible. That was probably the worst I got through that corner. And unfortunately, like, I gave him nowhere to go.
Sorry, Chris.
Nah, man. I can't hear me talking back, but yeah, I basically told him, like, my bad, dude. Like, I clearly made an awful corner there. Slowed us both down so much. really just gave him nowhere to go, unfortunately. So I'm just thankful that we made some contact. Thankfully, neither one of us got knocked out. We were able to keep going. I wanted to give him that spot and race to the next corner. So again, I'm just tucking in, trying to be smart. Let's see where we ended up here. Okay, so I wasn't sure what happened there. When obviously I knew this happened. This is me telling him I'm sorry. See if he says anything.
Yeah, just gotta slow down.
Okay, that's right. So yeah, I wasn't really sure what happened. Obviously we talked about it earlier on. I was drafting him hard. I was really close to him. I couldn't tell, and even watching it back, it was kind of hard to see, like, did I brake too late? Did I not compensate again for that speed difference that I was carrying into turn one? Didn't he brake maybe a little bit earlier, let off a little bit earlier than normal, and that little split second? I don't really know what happened, but my guess is I didn't compensate very well for the extra speed I was carrying into turn one and got into the back of him. And again, thankfully, neither one of us ended up flying off the track as a result of that. So that was just a really poor full lap for me. I made a couple pretty stupid mistakes. Made a huge mistake going into this section of the track on the last lap, which put Chris in a really bad situation, and thankfully he was able to just square me up just right, hit me in the back, and not cause any crazy damage for either of us. And then, yeah, thankfully then when I hit him, it was also, I guess, square enough. He was able to save it, went through, was able to serve his penalty. I backed out. I wasn't going to, it's not how I want to pass anybody. So I stayed behind him, let him serve his time penalty and move on. I was not expecting him to dive into the pit at this point. That caught me off guard completely. So both Chris and John jumped into the pits, and that's why I start looking up, like, wait, what's my my fuel situation? Because that completely caught me off guard. So then my mentality is, okay, there's no one around me. I did notice last couple laps that Darian's been catching us up a little bit. JR is kind of checking out. He's about 5 seconds up. I saw Al up in the distance there, but didn't think we were going to catch him much. So kind of start thinking, I'm going to push this until I have to pit. Let's just put in the best laps we can put in. Try to put ourselves in a situation to take advantage the best we can and do the best we can getting in and out of the pits. So remember, both Chris and John went in the pits together. And so I'm thinking about that too, like, okay, I want to know, where does JR come out? He's 5 seconds up on me right now. Where do those guys end up once I come out and we all cycle through on our pit stop? So I'm trying to get some draft from him, just trying to do anything I can do to have the best laps possible. I'm thinking I'm light on fuel, my car is as light as it's going to be until the very end of the race, hopefully, if I get my fuel strategy correct. Just trying to get the most out of this kind of optimal situation. Making a little bit of progress on JR. Not that that's really the goal necessarily, because he's got to pit too. But just trying to put in some laps. And you can see with the delta, I'm definitely doing a pretty good job with that. JR pits. Leo and Jeffrey are in. I think it's just going to be me and Jason out. And this is going to be my last lap. I have to pit after this. So we're sitting a solid P2. I don't know why it just didn't rain in the middle of the race. And, just go ahead and give me a sweet P2. I'll take a podium. I don't care. I'll be that guy that wins his first race at Talladega because it rained. Totally fine with that. Unfortunately, rained not in iRacing yet, so that's not going to happen. Spoiler alert. But the thought process stays the same. I'm trying to put in some banger laps here just to give myself the best possible opportunity to be in front of those guys and maybe even have a little bit of a gap to those guys as we come out of the pits. Previous lap was pretty much, actually it was my best lap of the session at a 53.2. And this one is pretty much right on par with it. If you take a look at that delta, we're about a tenth off of it right now. Just thinking, hit my marks, get into this corner smooth, go through Parabolica smooth. I already actually have my finger over the pit limiter, because I don't want to do anything stupid there. Unfortunately, I did not have a great entry to that. My exit wasn't terrible. So at least we're not going to bleed time all the way down. We'll kind of maintain it. Try to get through Parabolica. Not the best, not the worst. One thing I don't practice very well are pit entrances. So I'll put that pit limiter on, slam on the brakes. Definitely had a little bit more to give there, but close enough without risking a speeding penalty. JRT sets our fuel. Try to hit our mark. That's one of the better ones I've ever done, if we're being honest. And off we go. Spun a little bit coming out, not bad. Looking down at my relative, see where we're at. JR's going to go by. But JR's not 5 seconds ahead anymore, so that's positive. And I'm looking, I'm in front of Darren, in front of Chris, and in front of John. Which honestly I was super surprised by. Really trying to focus on having a good turn one, which of course I just completely blow. But not terrible. Kinda thankfully those guys are all together. And I realized that as I looked through those deltas. Just to kind of see, like, you know, where are those guys? Are they super tight with one another? Are they going to race each other? Are they going to work together and try to catch me up? All that's kind of going through my mind right now. Maybe it shouldn't. There's probably a part of me that should just forget the fact that they exist. They're about 2.5 seconds behind me at this point. I don't have to worry about them, you know, being right on top of me and kind of paying attention to what moves they're trying to make. And at some point here soon, you'll notice that I deactivate the virtual mirror because I realize they're 2 seconds behind. Last thing I need to do is look up and pay attention at all to where they are. So at some point here shortly, I'll hit the button on my steering wheel that actually turn that virtual mirror off. And just truly try to focus in and just knock out some laps. Because my thought process at this point is, yeah, there it goes, virtual mirror's gone. I'm sitting in a pretty nice spot. Sitting P5 once it all kind of shakes through here. We go through the start finish one more time. I'm in a great spot. I'm 2.5 seconds up. I'm only 4 seconds behind JR, so we did make some progress. Not as much as I would have liked, of course, but certainly made some progress. So as it all kind of goes through there, timing and scoring, sitting P5, about 2 seconds ahead of those guys. Took a look up, how many laps do we have left to go? And let's try to focus up and bang out some laps. I knew that was coming. And it still surprised me. Yeah, I don't know what to even say about that. I don't, how can you screw that corner up any worse other than to go flying off into the sand? That's something I need to work on. I think that's a really important point to make at this point of the race. We've been running for, I don't know, let's just assume the clock's right at 25 minutes. I don't think it is. Let's just assume it is. Plus the heat race, plus a little bit of practice, qualifying. We've been in VR, running a car in anger for somewhere in the neighborhood of 40, maybe 50 minutes already at this point, with about 15 or so to go. And it's one of those things where it's a mental battle at some point. This is not, I'm not getting better throughout, any point of this race. I'm not getting worse. It's just, it's the ability to just 100% focus mentally on the task at hand, and that is definitely something that I struggle with. You see me shaking my head like an idiot. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. It's easy. It's so easy to let your mind wander. Case in point, my oldest son today fell off his skateboard and thought he broke his wrist, and so we had to take him. My wife had to take him she did take him to get it x-rayed and check on it. It's kind of inconclusive as to what actually went down there, but stuff like that kind of started entering my mind, like he's got a big baseball season coming up, and I would hate for him to miss any of that, of course, and he's been working so hard and getting prepared, and I start thinking about that because I'm not battling anybody. I'm not really close to anybody in this race at this point, so it's really easy to let your mind wander and start thinking about other things that are going on in the real world, right? And so I did that multiple times throughout these final laps. And like we talked about earlier, it's so easy to have one really bad corner like we had on that last lap, and I lost more than a second because of that one corner. And thankfully, if you look at the deltas for the guys behind me, they're battling. Darren was an 8th at the start of the last lap. He's gained 2 positions, so clearly they're duking it out a little bit. And you'll hear, I think John comes across the radio at some point and says, "Hey man, if we work together, we'll catch Chris in no time." And I was gonna make a little joke back to him in the radio, but I think it was at that point I also decided to mute my radio and just really try to focus. So it truly, sim racing is very interesting in that respect. It's just so okay. So you kind of saw my head tilt to the side, like,
Sorry,
huh?
Darren.
I looked up, saw that I had a 10x, and I was completely shocked. Like, I had no idea where that came from. So I kind of turned my head to the side. That's totally me. But yeah, to kind of get back to it, having the kind of the ability to purely focus on what you're trying to do, really, really like isolate everything else out of your mind for just that short period of time. Sounds really easy, it's really difficult to do, and I think that's one of the things that just people who excel at what they're doing are able to do, and I think that extends far beyond sim racing. That's real traditional sports, that's business, that's just any kind of execution, just pure isolation, pure focus. So difficult to do, but that's just one of those things. I'm literally talking to myself out loud at this point in the race, like telling myself to focus, like stop thinking about anything else, stop worrying about, don't listen to this, don't look at that mirror, just 100% next corner, next apex, get your eyes in the right spot, hit the right braking mark, and just knock out a couple laps. And yeah, I'm quite literally pep talking myself on these last couple laps to do that. And yeah, that is real. That is definitely something I'm thinking about. So we did get a chance to see that clock. It's just over 9 minutes left in the race, 9.5 minutes there. So we're definitely coming down to it. We've only got a couple laps to go. Minding the gap. Got a pretty nice one now behind us, about 4.5 seconds to the 3 behind us. And they've lost some time. They're definitely jumping around a little bit. Definitely at some point John comes over the radio. There we are.
Could have caught Chris like an hour ago, guys.
I really should have made a joke. I should have said something back, but I didn't. Because honest, again, like, that's where my mind goes. Like, oh, I want to make a joke and get some laughs. Reality of it is, no time for jokes. Turn the microphone off. Focus. Just do your job. And unfortunately for me, I'm not so good at that whole focus thing. So you'll see as we kind of wind down these last 8 minutes or so of the race, I'll definitely be making a couple mistakes along the way. That gap will close up a little bit. Let's see if we can hang on, give ourselves a nice top 5. It's another instance, again, just, I mean, we're talking an extra foot to the left, and I'm sitting in the sand somewhere with 8 minutes to go, throwing away a top 5, which would have been a sad state of affairs. And I think, one thing that I tend to do it goes one way or the other. I make a mistake, I make like an egregious mistake like that one there. I mean, that was a pretty serious correction to keep that car going straight. I'll either do one of two things. I'll either compound, which you've seen at some of my previous races, maybe even the heat race. Make a couple in this heat race. Make a couple mistakes in a row and just like kill a second and a half in one lap, and just really let the guys behind me back into the race. Or I will kind of overly compensate, right? So I'll get to a position where I'm sitting there thinking, I can't make that. I need to like back this up. I need to back up every corner. I need to give myself more time. And then I find that I've done that far too conservatively and have really given up more time. I probably would have been better off to just go balls to the wall and make a couple little mistakes than I would have been to just be super conservative, because I probably gave up more time doing that anyway. So one thing I'm noticing at this point in the race, I'm looking up to my left and my right in my overlay as we make another massive mistake into that chicane, giving our guys another second and a half back. Like literally in that one chicane, we just gave back a second and a half, which is just crazy. But yeah, it's one of those things. Right before that happened, I looked up at my JRT overlay as looking at the fuel situation, and we are literally on 0. On the left, it says we have 4.5 laps of it's the left one. 4.5 laps of fuel left. And on the right, I've got 4.4 laps to run. So we're talking about the fuel tank is going to be absolutely bone dry as we go through on the start finish line. I think finally I get smart enough to turn my race communications off and just purely focus on the task at hand here. But truly, we'll be looking up at this JRT overlay a couple times here and noticing how close we are on fuel. It's going to be extremely tight. But yeah, what happened in that previous mistake is I looked up, I saw how close I was on fuel, which you can see there. Four laps of fuel, 3.9 laps to go. We are right on it. So I look up, notice how close it was. My mind instantly starts thinking about that, and then I make a massive mistake, give up a second and a half. So there needs to be. I need to find ways to compensate for that. Find ways to just isolate and just forget about it. I mean, the reality of the situation is we're currently P5. We've got a 3-second lead to 6th. Those guys, if they work together, could certainly catch me up. I can't do anything about that. It's outside of my control. And frankly, at this point, fuel's almost outside of my control. I could save a little bit. But if I do much saving at all, those guys are going to be on my gearbox in an instant. So I'm pretty much committed to this strategy anyway at this point. We've only got a couple laps to go, so probably would have been best to just never look up again and just hammer down and bring it home, or run out of fuel in the last lap and be done with it. And if that's the way that it went, that's a lesson to learn, and we go into the next race making some adjustments to our fuel calculations and go from there. But the idea of looking up, letting that enter my mind, and you'll see I do this constantly throughout these last 3.5 laps or so, trying to get a sense of where we're sitting on fuel. So it's got 3.2 laps in the tank, 3.1 laps to go. Yeah, it just would have been, I think, smart. It's so interesting to be able to watch these races from this perspective. I just did this race like an hour ago, so everything's super fresh, but just being able to see it like this, know what I was thinking about in the moment, and now get to see that information all kind of the second time with hindsight being what it is, and I'm also not driving a car. I can just sit here and talk and think through it. It would have been so much smarter to just never look up and just say, okay, it's going to be super tight, maybe I'll do a touch of fuel saving so long as we maintain a certain gap to the guys behind, and whatever it is what it is. But I don't do that. I'm going to look up quite a bit. And if you have an opportunity, when I glance up again at the very far right, there's a blue box. That shows you how much fuel I need added to get to the end of the calculated race distance, and that calculation's based off the leader's pace. So whatever, you know, they're setting the pace. Basically, for the last couple minutes, it's been at 0.0. So I am, and that's in gallons. So I am literally, I mean, absolutely perfect on fuel, so long as we can actually get to the end of this race and finish the race. Jim's telling us we got 5 minutes to go. I must have said 5 minutes of fuel. 2 minutes remaining on the clock. So I guess that means we've got 2 laps to go. Maybe 3. I didn't catch it when we just looked up. But Leo and Jeffrey are so far ahead. Maybe it's 3. I'm sure I'll look up as we go to the start finish here. Putting in some decent laps though. Laps aren't too bad. Couple tenths off. We're not letting those guys in too much. John is certainly quick and is caught up. He's 2.5 behind. So we've got 2 laps to go. And I remember looking down, seeing 2.6, thinking, oh, 2 laps. Damn, that sucks. Like, it would have been nice if this was the last lap. Pretty good through 1 and 2. I'll certainly take just under 2 tenths off my best. I'll take that for sure. With a 2-second lead. I'd like to hope that at some point here I stop looking up and stop looking for that fuel, but I don't think I do. Yeah, too conservative right there. Good exit though. Could have done that a touch better, but I'm not complaining there. That's fine. Definitely complaining there on those tires. Still sitting 2.6. Starting to feel pretty good about it. Again, though, letting my mind get too focused in the future. Awful conservative through there. Gonna bleed a little bit, I think. Pretty good exit. Take another glance up. At this point, all I'm looking at is that blue box on the far right to make sure that it's not saying I need 0.1 or 0.2 or something like that. The other concern I have is sometimes the leaders can get to a place where they actually, you run an extra lap. I was also making sure that we weren't going to be there, because if we were going to be there, I was definitely going to be in trouble. I knew that from the start. Yeah, Jim, we know. This is the last lap, and this is the absolute last lap of fuel. At this point of the race, in this last lap, I start questioning to myself, am I gonna start, when do we kind of start sputtering out? That's a thought that started entering my mind. Like, do we sputter when it's like 0.2 left? Because I'm gonna have like nothing left once we get across the start finish line. So if it's 0.2 and I'm sputtering on that back straight before Parabolica, that could be trouble. At some point, I actually pull a clutch. I think I was trying to test something. Didn't work. I don't know what the hell I was doing, honestly. But you'll hear it. I think I'd do it on the back stretch going down to the S. Just trying to be smooth with some inputs. Not a bad lap going. Yep. So 0.2 is in the tank right now. Gallons. Yeah, I pulled the clutch for a second. Like, I was going to try to coast it, and my brain broke for half a second. And I was like, screw it, we're just going. So I'm fully expecting right now, you can look at oil temp. I'm starting to see some lights on the steering wheel. I wasn't sure what the hell's going on there. Look up, I got 0.1 left in the tank. was like, alright, at this point I could probably just pull the clutch and coast. But I'm just going to hammer down, gain as much speed as possible if I start sputtering out. So we get, it works out almost perfectly. Across the line. Got P5. I'm waiting for the sputter. There it is. I mean, that was something else. That was something else. Cool. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll take a P5 in this league any day of the week. Fueled strategy worked itself out there and had a great race. So, hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you later.